The movie begins with a news circulating about a professor named John Mall, who attempted a heart transplant surgery for the first time, but his bravery resulted in the death of the patient on the operating table. The scene shifts to another surgeon named Zbigniew Religa, who is one of John Mall's students working in his clinic. Religa follows the footsteps of his professor and attempts a heart transplant surgery on a human body. During this, he receives an emergency call from the hospital, and he hurries to check on the patient. Religa prepares to perform the surgery, but the others stop him, telling him that he has a very low chances of survival. Despite this, Religa performs the surgery. In the morning, Dr. Mall is informed about this, and he calls Religa to this office. He gets mad at Religa, but Religa tells him that it was the only option he had at the time. As Religa leaves the office, he meets another patient, a little girl named Yuka. Then, he drives back home and falls asleep on the chair. Soon, his wife Anna arrives and covers him with a blanket. The scene shifts to a conference, where Religa meets another capable surgeon who pushes him to explore the possibilities of saving lives through heart transplants. After the conference, Religa goes to a bar for some drinks and meets a fellow doctor named Pasik, who encourages him to open his own clinic in Warsaw. But Religa is not convinced. He goes out for some air and meets two more fellow doctors named Andrzej Bochenek and Marian Zembala. They inform him that they are being sent for internships in England and Holland because they are too invested in the idea of heart transplants. Religa tells them that there is a problem because the old are too scared to go for it and the young ones are not allowed. The scene shifts and we see Yuka being taken in for the surgery. During the surgery, Religa realizes that Yuka has acquired atresia and the surgery is not possible without a heart transplant. Religa does his best to save the little girl, but she dies during the surgery. Religa leaves the hospital heartbroken because of his failure to save the child. He goes to a pub and drinks to forget the pain. Then, he returns home and blames himself for his failure. In the morning, the ethics committee calls Religa for an explanation, but he tells them that he has no other option. During the discussion, Religa tells everyone that a heart transplant could have saved the little girl, but everyone calls him mad for trying to experiment on a child. Then, Religa decides to go to Warsaw to meet Pasik. He comes back to meet Professor John Mall and tells him that they should consider launching a heart transplant program. He tells him about the positive results achieved by the British and tries to convince him, but Professor Mall rejects his proposal. After this, he calls Pasik and tells him that he is ready to open his own clinic in Warsaw. He meets Anna and takes her out for a beautiful evening. Then, he tells her that he is offered his own clinic and he has to leave. Anna gets sad to hear this, but allows him to go. Finally, Religa informs Professor John Mall about his leave and takes his belongings with him. On his way out, he sees a patient in a serious condition and jumps in for help. As he is leaving, he is thanked by the patient's father for saving his son's life. Religa drives to Warsaw and meets Pasik. He takes him inside the building, which is still under construction. Religa looks around and asks Pasik about the equipment for the OR, but realizes that Pasik does not have the necessary funds to start the clinic. Soon, they are joined by Dr. Andrzej Bochenek, Marian Zembala, and some female staff to help form a team. Religa decides to go meet an investor and asks him for an amount of $3 million to start a cardiac clinic. But he begins laughing at him. Feeling disheartened, Religa comes back and meets another investor, but he rejects the offer as well. Religa discusses the issue with Pasik, and he advises him to meet the committee and ask them for funds, but Religa is hesitant to do so. However, he has no choice but to meet them. He meets a man who tells him that Comrade Jadwiga will help them. The man informs him that the deal has to go through the Ministry of Health. He will deposit it as a subsidy grant in aid to the clinic in Warsaw. This way, Religa will receive the funds for the clinic. Religa returns to the clinic with the good news, and everyone gets to work on transforming the clinic. After the hard work of a couple of days, the clinic is ready to begin operation. Religa invites Professor John Mall for the inauguration ceremony. Professor Mall is welcomed by the staff warmly, and they all head to the OR for their first cardiac operation. The inaugural surgery became a success, and soon the clinic became famous for its competency in Warsaw. Soon after the celebration of their first success, Religa receives a phone call from the Ministry of Health, and he is informed that his grant has been suspended. Religa is given 2 weeks of time to clear the clinic space. Religa reaches out to a couple of people for help, but all he gets is rejections. In the following days, Religa loses his temper while performing surgeries, as he is quite tense about keeping the clinic running. During this, a patient arrives who desperately needs a heart transplant, and there is tense atmosphere at the clinic. They reach out to a couple of donors, but there are rejections again. Then, Religa receives a phone call from another clinic who are working on liver transplant. They warn him that if his heart transplant fails, things will also get difficult for them, and their years of research will go to waste. However, Religa ignores their call and wishes them all the best before hanging up. Meanwhile, Religa is informed that they have found a donor for the heart transplant. On the other hand, the Ministry of Health sends some men to clear the clinic. A fight breaks out at the clinic while Religa rushes to save a dying patient, and there is a tense atmosphere at the clinic. After this, Religa meets a government official and requests him to get the grant approved for the clinic. Later, he receives the call that the grant has been approved, and everyone takes a sigh of relief. During this, a new doctor named Romuald joins them. Religa immediately welcomes him aboard. After this, Religa and his team head to a location to receive the heart for the transplant. They find a young man in the OR who is pronounced brain dead. Religa meets the parents and takes their consent to donate their son's heart to a dying man. Once the parents allow it, Religa and his team receive the heart and take it back to the clinic. Now, everyone on the team gets ready to perform the first ever heart transplant surgery. The surgery goes well, and Religa decides to call the media and announce their success. However, after 7 days, the patient begins to collapse and dies on the spot. Religa is shocked at his failure, but he does not stop. He decides to find a new donor and perform another surgery. Soon, a new patient arrives, and once again the surgery goes well. However, it's announced on the media that the second patient had also died after 30 successful days of the surgery. Religa begins losing his mind and decides to give it another shot. They find a new donor and another patient who desperately needs a heart transplant. During the surgery, the heart gets damaged, and Religa asks his team to quickly find a healthy monkey or a pig to hook the heart until they find a new donor. The team sets off to find a healthy pig, but it dies due to a heart attack. When Religa hears this, he stops the surgery and loses his mind. He begins drinking uncontrollably and smokes all the time. This is when his team decides that Religa needs some time off to come back to his senses. Romek goes to his home and informs Anna about his deteriorating situation due to his strong commitment to his work. At first, Anna gets mad, but then she finally gives in and visits Religa. Religa finds comfort with her and finally gets some rest. After this, he visits John Mall and discusses his problems with him. John Mall gives him a couple of advice and tells him to find humility within himself. Religa gets back to the clinic full of hope and performs some calculations. He concludes that it was the overdose of cyclosporin drug that resulted in the deaths of the previous patients. Now, the team is getting ready for their fourth heart transplant. During this, Religa receives letters from his opponents asking him to stop this madness of killing people, but he is too determined to make it happen. The fourth surgery takes place, and this time with proper calculations and precautions, everything goes well. Religa sits by the patient's bed until he recovers, and it is revealed that the man who got the transplant lived up to 7 years after the surgery. At the end, Religa is shown in his old age still performing heart transplant surgeries, and there is satisfaction on his face. This is where the movie ends. If you liked the video, don't forget to hit like and subscribe to our channel for more amazing recaps.